Hi gang, it is me, Stu the Jew, back with another tale of your Belinda, or your ass, or whatever. But anyway, that wasn't very funny, was it? I'm not a very funny guy, and I'm doing my best to hide my double chin, which is really something I'm considering having whacked off to the tune of about $80,000. But if I didn't have this double chin, I would look really almost cool. But anyway, I want to read you a story, and I don't know when I wrote it, but I did write it. And it's partly fact, partly fiction, like most of my pieces are. And it takes place in one of my favorite cities in the world, which is Las Vegas, Nevada. I just love Las Vegas. I don't know what it is. It's something about it's not for the gambling or any of that bullshit. It's just the idea that you can go there and the whole town becomes your home, kind of. You can go in any place and any time of the day, and there's no time and there's no day and there's no night, and you can check into any hotel, and you can then use the swimming pool in the hotel next door, and soon the whole town just becomes like your house, and it's just this great playground to have fantasies, and you can meet people, you can watch people, you can eat $1.34 breakfasts. You can see girls with big tits or no tits, and you can see Mexicans passing out porn on the streets, and you can see a cross-cultural menagerie of people from all across America. And there they are, all trying to do something. I don't know what. But anyway, this is not a lecture about Las Vegas. This is a story about a guy, kind of like me, who, well, you know what? Let's just start the story. And it is called The Good Boy, for reasons which you shall soon discern. My pronunciation is not very good, and I'm trying to get better as I do these readings. So I hope you'll excuse me. I should really get a glass of water, but I'm not going to. So here we go. The Good Boy. See, I fucked that up already. The Good Boy, by Stuart Goldman. The scariest movie I ever saw was this old black and white thing done in the 60s called Wigwam. I don't know why it was called that, because it wasn't anything about Indians, and it didn't have anything to do with them either. What it was about were these 6 people, 3 guys, 3 girls, who were trapped on an island by a maniac. Okay, sure, there are a million movies with this exact same theme. I know that. But this one was just different. Sorry to pick my nose in front of you. I'm telling you, you're just going to have to trust me. I didn't see the whole thing. I was about 12 at the time, and it was late at night, and I was flipping the channels around, and I stopped on this movie, and there were a bunch of people all bloody and stabbed and stuff, and they were obviously very scared. It was black and white flick, which, damn, I have to take a shit. Hold on. Okay, I did it. I'm back. And by the way, it only took me 13 seconds to deposit one perfectly formed plop. I like to call them plops. Wipe my ass badly and get back in here. I can shit really quick like that, and I was once very popular because of it. Fish can shit quicker than lightning, my roommate Spud Phillips said, picking at one of the many pimples on his chin and neck. He was always picking his face. I hated him, but not because of that. That's my name, Fish Lowenstein. It's actually Felix, to tell you the truth. People started calling me Fish when I was pretty little on account of, geez, I don't know why they did, come to think of it. I do have this sort of thing for fish. I guess you could call it kind of a fish fetish in a way. I mean, I think about them a lot. I don't know why that is. All I know is that I used to spend a lot of time going into various aquarium stores located throughout the greater San Fernando Valley and watching the fish communicate with them and communicating with them as much as possible. I was pretty sick at the time. I'd just gotten out of jail. I'll tell you about that later. It wasn't my fault, I swear. And I was sort of wandering around the streets. And I took a bus and I ended up in this place called Reseda. And before that, actually, I was living in the Blake Hotel on the corner of 5th and Main Streets. It's not a very nice place as far as downtown LA hotels go. Anyhow, I got off the bus in Reseda. It was around 5 in the afternoon, and the light was really bright and coming at you at that particular angle that made everything really difficult. The demonic particles were really bad too. You could almost see them. I don't want to tell you about the demonic particles right now, but take my word for it. They do exist, okay? Thank you. Anyhow, the light was making me feel real weak, and the demonic particles were sucking my energy out. That's their purpose. And God damn it, I got to get this camera straight. And all of the people on the street started looking flat, and their faces had no expression. And I felt like I was going to faint or throw up or start stabbing people in the face. So I went into this fish store. I didn't know it was a fish store when I went in. I just happened to be standing in front of it. Somebody had painted the store window with big sloppy red and green letters that said grand opening. But of course the place had obviously been open forever. As soon as I got in the store, I felt better. First there was the sound. All you could hear was the bubbling of the tanks. Plus, it was quite dark in there, and I always felt better in the dark. It seemed like the only lights were the ones that were on in the different aquariums. So I started going around, one by one, and looking in each of them. It was amazing, the things that were going on in some of those aquariums. And some of them, there were only one or two kinds of fish. Excuse me. But in others, they had all different kinds. You could tell that in the ones with all the different kinds that the fish didn't really like some of their neighbors. I will get this camera straight. But mostly the fish just swam around making those little O things with their mouths and inspecting stuff, having adventures. You know, all the stuff that fish normally do. I wondered what they were thinking. Whatever they were thinking, it didn't have sharp edges like the thoughts that were inside of most people's heads. That was for sure. They looked far too peaceful. Their thoughts were more like Jell-O. You know, all soft and nice and mushy. Anyway, that first day I stayed in the fish store for hours and hours. In fact, I stayed in there until it closed. The people who worked there didn't bother me. Only one time this Mexican guy with one of those little underlip beards, you know, like trombone players have, came up and said, "Can I help you?" I asked him if they had any blowfish, and he said, sure, they had one. And then he showed me the tank where the blowfish was kept. I guess the blowfish was probably hiding in his unblown state naturally, because I couldn't see anything in the tank. Well, finally I left the store. After I got out, it was dark outside, and I was in Reseda, California. And I didn't know where Reseda was, but I didn't like it there, wherever it was. The people on the streets all looked crummy and cheap. For your information, I happen to be a very uncrummy person. You might think that just because I was in jail and all, that I myself might be a crummy person, but I'm not. In fact, I was raised to be a very good boy, and that's what I've always been, a good boy. Let me tell you just how good I am. First of all, I always put the right shoe in front of the left. I mean, whenever I see shoes, no matter whose they are, that's what I do. I put the right one in front of the left one. I line them up all nice and neat. It's a little trick I learned long ago. What it does, you see, is it protects the person who owns the shoes from bad things happening to them. They don't know it, but they are secretly protected. So that's one thing. Also, I'm always polite and nice to old people. And this is very hard for me because I don't particularly like old people all that much. Often they smell bad, and they always want to tell you about things you don't care about. When that happens to me, I listen until I can make a good excuse, one that won't hurt their feelings, and then I get away from them as fast as I can. Later, I sent them postcards, like this one old lady, Helen, who owned the liquor store where I shopped. I never shop in supermarkets, only liquor stores. Helen was this old Jewish lady. There was absolutely nothing like about her. She was mean, she was cheap, she lied, she had bad breath, She had a big mole on her chin with a hair sticking out of it that I often wanted to bite, but I didn't naturally. And she talked incessantly in this Russian Jewish voice with phlegm in her throat. And all she would talk about were her various illnesses. And she never said thank you when you bought stuff at her stupid goddamn liquor store. Not a nice lady, okay? But what do you think I did while I was in jail? I sent Helen all these letters. These letters were nothing but lies, naturally. I told Helen that I was in Israel at a kibbutz, and that I was going to live there for a year, and then I was going to come back to the U.S. and attend junior college to get a degree in humidification repair, which means basically a person who fixes air conditioners. I thought that sounded nice. So I told her all this stuff, see? Now, just think how happy that old sackbutt was to get my postcards, even though they weren't really coming from a kibbutz in Israel, but rather from the men's central jail in downtown Los Angeles. Oh, I was a veritable saint, was I not? Yes, I was. I was a matzah, a challah, and a b'nai b'rith. Oh my goodness, I forgot to tell you about the movie. I do that sometimes. I mean, I start talking about stuff, then I forget to finish. So please excuse me. Anyhow, what happened in this particular movie that made it different from all other movies about maniacs who trap people on deserted islands is that in this movie, the maniac winds up killing everybody. Nobody gets away. And then the movie ends, just like that. There's this one really terrible scene, I'll never forget it, where there's only one guy left. And he's been stabbed and beaten all these times by the maniac. And he's covered in blood. And he's running. And you know that this guy's got to get away because he's the last guy, right? Something will save him. He'll get real strong and he'll beat the maniac up, or a helicopter full of Stallone guys will land and save him at the very last minute. But instead, what happens is that this guy is running, and all of a sudden, behind him, you see the maniac running after him. Then there's this close-up shot of the maniac, and he's got this real terrible look on his face, and the guy is running really fast. And you can see this shot kind of from underneath, so you can see up the maniac's nostrils. And he's running so fucking fast, it just scares the holy shit out of you. The other guy is running too, but the maniac is gaining on him. And then there's another shot from the front, and the maniac is gaining, and all of a sudden he jumps with this horrible spider look on his face. And well, you never see what the maniac does to the guy, but the last shot in the movie, before the credits, it just shows the maniac sitting there on the island all by himself. And all the good guys are dead. And guess what? That's the end of the movie. That is it. So after I saw that movie, actually I only saw the last 20 minutes. I kept searching in TV Guide to see if I could find Wigwam ever playing again. I went through all of my TV Guides, which I subscribed to, for the next 3 years. And I read every single page, but I could never ever find Wigwam again. After a while, I started thinking that I'd made the whole thing up. That's a problem I have. I tell myself something so many times that I don't know if it really happened or if I made it up. It's kind of awful, but I've learned to live with it. Still, I'm pretty sure it was a real movie. But then, who the hell would make a movie like that, where it just ends and all the good guys are dead? I don't know, but somebody did. And then sometimes I wonder about all the people who played in the movie. Where are they now? This was in about 1960, I think. Do they even remember being in it? Have they gone on to become big movie successes? Oh, somehow I don't think so. Probably they all got old, and some of them live in hotels and they're on welfare and stuff. They live in Hollywood, and they have to cash their checks at one of those 24-hour check cashing places. Anyway, after that first day in the fish store, I kept going back. And after I'd get tired of one fish store, I'd find another one, and I'd kind of live in it for a while. That's what I felt like I was living in the fish store, and all the fish were my neighbors. And they'd float by to say, hello, hello, and I'd say hi back. And we'd swap stories and have barbecues and stuff. And the Mexican guy with the beard lip could even come if he wanted to, if he was nice. And then afterwards, I'd find another fish store, and I'd do the same thing all over again. Of course, I didn't actually live in a fish store. I just made that all up. Sorry, I do that sometimes. Where I lived actually was in Las Vegas, at the Fun City Motel. I moved there right after I got out of jail and out of Reseda. The reason I picked the Fun City Motel was that there was this coupon selection section of the LA Times that said you could get a $10 discount if you took the coupon in. And the ad said, free TV and maid service. Those two things were highly important to me, the TV and the maid service, because I needed TV in order to spy on people. See, if you know how to use TVs, you can actually see into other people's houses with them. And as far as the maids went, well, I would always be really nice to them. And if they were pretty and Mexican, with a little bit of hair under their armpits, I would really like them, and they would like me back. And maybe we would have a little bit of a nice romance going on or something. I liked maids because they were sort of like your mother, except they would fuck you and they would clean up after you. That was the best possible combination. And if they had a little hair under their armpits, which I love, but they smelled clean, well, you were home free, baby. You were ready, Teddy. Pow, pow, pow. Also, see, the Fun City Motel was just across the street from the Circus Circus. Now, the Circus Circus, as we all know, is a real shithole. One of the crappiest hotels in Las Vegas. But, for some reason, I just loved it. Upstairs was kind of like this old carny type place with all these cool old machines like skee ball and places where you could throw a baseball and try to knock over bottles. They had clowns and jugglers, and they even had this trapeze artist. It would have been better if they had some really young pretty girl, but instead they had this old broad. She must have been at least 50. And even though she still had a pretty good body, she had this loose flesh around her arms that jiggled when she climbed up to the rope to get to her trapeze. They had it rigged up so the trapeze lady would fly over the lower level of the casino and point all the jerks downstairs playing slots. And she'd look up, and they'd nudge their wives, and I meant they would look up, the men, and they'd stop puffing on their cigars for a minute because this lady was flying around in the air above them with her jiggly old arms flapping around all over the place. I'm telling you, man, it was really quite a sight to see. I loved the Circus Circus for some reason. The coolest thing is that since it was right across from the Fun City Motel, it kind of seemed like the two places were attached to one another. And so even though I just had my one little room at the Fun City Motel, it was kind of like, if I thought about it, my room stretched across the street. And then the whole Circus Circus would be just another part of my house. My days were frequently very routine. In the morning, I'd get up, out of bed. I didn't make my bed or anything because Lupe, the Mexican maid, who was my mother and my fuckstress, would be there to clean things up. Lupe would always sneak a cig in the bathroom. I know, because I found her with the butts. But I didn't care, because I thought she was very nice to clean up my room, all nice and tidy. I love clean rooms. And then she'd fuck the shit out of me. When we were done fucking, I'd head across the street to the Circus Circus, plunk myself down in one of the big stuffed chairs in the lobby, and drink my paper cup of coffee, and read the Metro and entertainment section of the Las Vegas Sun. And, well, do you see how totally cool it was? I mean, my room only cost me $100 a week, and for that I had this whole gigantic hotel, lobby, swimming pool, games, health spas, parrots, rides, colored lights, pinball machines, magic shows, bad lounge acts, Siegfried and Roy, Paul Anka, Wayne Newton, Buddy Hackett, Don Rickles, girls with pasties on their nipples, one of my favorite things, 24-hour restaurants where you could eat soggy bacon and warmed-over eggs for $1.50, and that was just the very tippy top of it. The main thing was I had all these places to wander around in, and I could live in them and have adventures at them, and they were all mine. And if you expanded the equation a little bit further, the entire city of Las Vegas became my house. All of the hotels are really one gigantic place. They were all basically the same. And you could just go and relax or eat and swim and watch all the crazy people and try to figure out what their lives were like. This was my absolute favorite thing to do. And you could be anonymous and nobody would say anything to you. Sorry, I didn't mean to pick my nose, but I had to. And they'd leave you alone. And you got all that for $100 a week. Plus, you could fuck the maid. I mean, what the heck? What more could a guy want? So, I was living in Vegas. But almost as soon as I got there, I got involved in something stupid. That's my problem, see. I'm real smart. In fact, I'm supposed to have this genius IQ. But I don't have any, I guess what you'd call, common sense. My mother always told me, and of course she was right, the fucking bitch. Anyhow, what happened, see, was I got greedy. Even though Loopy was really nice and sweet and a fairly good fuck, even though she invited me to meet her parents, they lived in kind of what you'd call the ghetto section of Las Vegas. Even though I had all that going for me, I got involved with this other girl. Ay, I'm such a putz. I knew she was trouble from the moment I spotted her, but I had to have her. Damn, I was so dumb and greedy and stupid. Her name was Renee. She was waitressing in this place called Moe's Coffee Shop, which was upstairs of the Mint, this crappy old club in downtown Las Vegas. I'd only go to downtown Vegas once in a while. It wasn't part of my house, and so I only went there when I wanted to get crummy. It was good to do that sometimes, because when you got crummy, you could realize what a good boy you really were. And you could realize a lot of other stuff as well, like that you were lucky to have this neat place to live with a maid, mother figure, who would fuck you upside down and sideways, and who would even stay after and clean up while you went downtown to Moe's and drank coffee and flirted with this gorgeous 18-year-old waitress with perfect tits named Renee. Now, Renee was no kid, I'll tell you. But I mean, she may have been only 18, but she'd been around the horn a few times. Fortunately, she wasn't all used up and thrashed like some young chicks who've been around. No, sir. Her skin was still young and perfect and fresh, and her eyes twinkled bright blue. And she had this real corny hairdo that was all out of style, kind of like Betty Grable. That's what she looked like, my Renee. She looked like something out of one of those old 1940s movies. She was an actual living, breathing doll. Ha-cha-cha. The first day we met her, she was kind of flirting with me, and then, boom, she spills an entire pot of coffee right in my lap. Thank God I was wearing my old brown leather bomber jacket, and most of the coffee went on that, because though some of it splashed on my thigh and burned it pretty bad. Oh my gosh, Renee squawked, bending down and swabbing at my crotch with her towel. I'm sorry. Oh, it's okay, I said, looking down at her hair. It was so pretty and smooth and shiny that I could hardly keep myself from patting her right on the top of her lovely little head. She looked up, the right part of her lip kind of going up in that funny little curly-cue way it had of doing. I feel like such a jerk, she said, her blue eyes twinkling. Look, whatever you want, it's on the house. Well, thank you very much, I said, polite. I was being such a good boy, but unfortunately, I wasn't thinking such good boy thoughts. Renee smiled again. Then she took another swab with her cloth. Well, she said, if there's anything I can do to make up for it, you let me know. Then she turned around and left, her perfect little butt twitching down the aisle. I let her know, all right. At 7 o'clock that evening, I lay, buck naked, behind her in bed. Renee was lying on her stomach, and she had her perfect 18-year-old ass stuck way up in the air, ready for, well, for whatever. And there wasn't a single pimple, not even a teeny tiny one to be seen. Oh, boy. Yep, Renee was a peach, all right. Not only was she sweet and nice and kind and good and generous, she was a bloody sexaholic. That girl did things to me that no hooker had ever suggested. Things that I'm actually too embarrassed to tell you. What's more, she would let me do absolutely anything I wanted to her. There was nothing that was off limits. I'd never done a whole lot of stuff I thought about to girls because I always wanted them to think that I was a good boy. And so I'd never asked them to do funny stuff. But with Renee, it was different. These are yours, she'd say, cupping a breast in each hand. And I'd just sit there amazed. These two wonderful, perfect, pink-nippled, 18-year-old breasts just stood there looking at me. And they really were all mine. From that first day, we got a routine going. Renee would get off work at Moe's at 5 p.m., and she'd go to her little room. She had this crummy little one-bedroom apartment right down the street, and we'd fuck for hours. Then we'd take a cab over to the Blurry Blue. That was really Caesar's Palace, but I like to call it the Blurry Blue because wherever you were on the strip, you could see it. And that's exactly what it looked like, this big, blue, blurry building. Anyway, Renee and I would have coffee at the Blurry Blue. Maybe we'd play some slots. Renee was usually lucky at slots. One time she even won a $3,500 jackpot. And then we'd plunk down on the couch in the lobby and we'd watch people, which was one of our favorite things to do. Look at that stupid idiot, Renee would say, twisting up her mouth in that way that didn't make her look so pretty. Where'd you get that coat? The friggin' Salvation Army? The guy would be like wearing orange pants and a bright yellow sports coat. After watching it for a while, it got so that everybody in the place was hilarious in one way or the other. Probably if I hadn't been with Renee, they might have just looked sad or pathetic, and I'd have sat there gotten all depressed. But as long as Renee was with me, everything was fun and nice. And most important of all, it was an adventure. You see, most people, after they turn into what you call adults, they don't have fun anymore. And they certainly don't have adventures. They just do stuff to fill up the time. And that's the most horrible thing I can imagine, being one of those people. Anyhow, after sitting there for a while, Renee would reach over and she'd grab my dick. I mean, she wouldn't pull it out or anything, but she'd grab it right there in the middle of the hotel lobby and all. But that time I'd gotten so crazy from all the sex stuff she'd done to me that I'd almost come in my jeans right there. Then what we'd do is we'd go back into one of the phone booths in the back of the cheap slots, and we'd fuck up against the wall. One time we fucked right in the hallway. I kept getting all scared that somebody would see us, but Renee didn't care. Would you actually fuck if other people could see you? I once asked her. Sure, she said. Why not? Just the idea that she would say that made me completely crazy. See, in my mind, fucking was something that, well, it was one of the dirtiest things that you could do. And if you let somebody see you while you were doing it, it was really impossible. So the fact that Renee said that she didn't care if people would see her fucking, well, that made me totally scared. And at the same time, it made her totally more desirable to me. After she said that, all I wanted to do was fuck her every single second, which is pretty much all we ever did. One time we fucked for 14 hours without stopping. I mean, we'd take a little rest periods and all that, but we never really stopped. We didn't even take a lunch break or anything. I came 26 times that day, and it seemed no matter how many times I'd come, there'd be more left. I can't believe it, Daddy, Renee chortled. You Jewish boys, you sure have a lot of cum inside you. Oh, man, did I ever get jealous when she said that. What do you mean, you Jewish boys? I sputtered. I just mean that Jewish guys have a lot of cum, that's all, she said defensively. Boy, was I ever starting to get nervous. Well, what other Jewish guys besides me have you been with? She was smoking a cigarette at the time, and she started making these little smokos in the air. For a second, she reminded me of one of the fish in the aquarium store. I was getting all knotted up inside. I wanted her to tell me, but I didn't want her to tell me. So, what other Jews? I asked again. I was really starting to get depressed now. Oh, I don't know, she said, exhaling smoke from one nostril. I never could figure out how she did that. Just this one guy is all. His name was Moshe or something. Moishe? She had fucked a guy named Moishe? How old was he, this guy? I don't know, about 50, I guess. Oh, dear Lord, no. My poor little sweet Renee had fucked a 50-year-old guy named Moishe. Please, no, this is too much. This is not fair. Did this guy have a lot of money or something? I mean, did he pay you? No, he didn't pay me. He was just this guy. I thought he was cute, so I fucked him. What's the big friggin' deal? And he had a lot of cum? I asked, feeling really scared. I was really nervous now. My hands were actually shaking. Oh, yeah, Renee laughed. He came so much I thought he was going to drown. Hey, but don't you worry, doggy daddy. You come just as much as he did. I mean, if that's what you're so dang worried about. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I just got real quiet after that. I put on my leather bomber jacket and I headed out the door. I just started walking. I walked for miles and miles, up and down the strip and back. But no matter how much I walked, I couldn't stop thinking about what Renee had told me. All I could picture in my head was some bald guy with lots of white hair popping out of his chest and shoulders, and his dick in her mouth, and him coming and coming and coming all over her face and her tits, and it made me sick and weak, and finally I went around the corner and I threw up in the gutter. I kept puking until my insides were raw. When I finally got back to the room, Renee was lying there in the bed. All she was wearing was this red bra and a matching garter belt. She knew what I wanted. So we fucked for about 4 hours. I fucked her and fucked her and fucked her until my cock was so sore I couldn't even touch it. But my mind wouldn't stop thinking. And finally what happened was I started crying. I was trying really hard not to, but I couldn't help myself. "Oh, doggy daddy," she purred, stroking my hair. "Don't be mad at your little sweet Renee. You're my little sweetie weetie pie. I don't care about anyone but you, baby." Then a bad thought came into my head. I pictured me grabbing the knife that was lying on the kitchen counter and stabbing Renee about 50 times in that stupid face of hers. I saw the whole scene. It scared me so bad that I jumped up and put on all my clothes and I headed for the door. "Where are you going, doggy?" Renee purred. I'm just going over to the circus." I said, "I want to catch the trapeze lady." "Don't worry, I'll be back pretty soon." But I didn't go to the circus. What I did was I walked the 2 miles down Las Vegas Boulevard all the way till I got to the Greyhound bus terminal. "Give me a ticket," I said to the guy behind the counter. "A ticket to where?" he said, real snotty-like. There was a bus sitting just outside, its motor running. "Where is that bus going?" I asked. "Missoula, Montana," the guy said. I plunked down 2 20s. The guy shoved a ticket at me. I'd never been to Missoula, Montana, but it didn't matter. I just wanted to be the hell out of where I was and be somewhere else. I was pretty sure that they'd have some fish stores in Missoula. Who knew? Maybe I could even get a job in one. I hopped on the bus and took a seat. There was this old black guy in the seat across from me. He smiled at me. It was a real nice smile, even though he only had about 3 front teeth. Then I saw that the guy had a Bible in his lap. Oh shit, that's all I needed was for some old fucker to start yakking to me about Jesus. I mean, sometimes I'm able to engage in one of those religious conversations, but not now. The bus started rolling. I shut my eyes and pretended like I was going to sleep, because I didn't want the old guy to find some excuse to start talking to me. I guess I must have been more tired than I thought, because pretty soon I fell asleep. Of course, it wasn't a real sleep. I rarely actually sleep. My mind will never shut up. Then I fell into this kind of dream. In the dream, I was walking down the hallway of my old house in Shaker Heights, Ohio. We lived there until I was 10. It was a real nice house, and I really loved it. But in the dream, the place was all beat up and crummy, and I knew that there were bad people that had lived in there after we'd moved out. And they'd left a lot of their stupid, stinking vibes in the house. And there was something else in that house, too. Something I didn't want to know about. It was something foul and gray and evil. The old black guy woke up and asked me if I wanted some gum. I said, okay. He handed me a stick of gum. And you know what? It was Beeman's Pepsin. I'd always loved that gum. Blackjack was my second favorite. I hadn't had Beeman's Pepsin gum since I was a kid. And so it sort of seemed like a good omen or something that this guy would give me a stick of Beeman's Pepsin. Then all of a sudden my depression lifted, and I was all happy again, just being in that bus chewing Beeman's Pepsin chewing gum and having a good time. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that I was about to embark upon another adventure. Hell, maybe I could even meet a pretty girl and we'd get married in a church, and she would be Janet Leigh or Natalie Wood, both of whom I'd always had a crush on. See, I was always falling in love with movie stars. But soon I fell into another dream. I think the gum fell out of my mouth while I was sleeping, because when I woke up it was sort of stuck all over my shirt. Asleep, awake, asleep, awake. I knew I was having what my psychiatrist called mood swings, One minute I'd be all happy, and the next I was going on a new adventure, and the next second everything was totally dark and empty and scary. There was no bottom to anything, and underneath everything there was this big pool. It wasn't good or it wasn't bad. It wasn't sad or it wasn't happy. It just was. I called this the pool of reality. And what this pool of reality told me was simply this, that none of it mattered. Because the fact was that however long my stupid life lasted, no matter how many adventures I had, at the end of it all, I'd be dead and in the ground, and Renee and everybody else I knew had ever known would be dead and in the ground, and we'd all just be dead in this stupid fucking stinking ground, and the birds would shit on our graves and stuff, and nobody would ever remember any of us, and everything would just go on as if none of us had ever been here. Then again, maybe we'd all be one big happy family flying around in heaven, and maybe singing songs with God and Gabriel and the rest of that bunch. And God would know that I had been a good boy, and he'd be my buddy and my pal, and we'd all just have a big old time. I mean, who knew anyhow? Not me, not the black guy, not the bus driver, not anybody. The sleep started to overtake me again. I tried to fight it, but it was a losing battle. My eyes were closing on me. I felt this gray-brown twisty thing whirling around my head. It was pulling me into it. So I started singing, Pepsi-Cola hits the spot, Pepsi-Cola hits the spot. Over and over and over again I sang it. But no matter how much I sung, the brown thing, kept pulling me inside it. My stomach was getting all knotted up now, and I thought I was going to puke my guts out any second. Finally, I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt all the way up over my head. That usually made me feel safe, and I started praying. I didn't really know how to pray, but I was praying as hard as I could, even though I didn't know if I believed in God or not. I was praying that he would help me because I'd been such a good boy. I knew as long as I stayed awake, I would be okay. But I wasn't staying awake. I was going around and around, and the gray twisty thing was strong now, and it was sucking me down and down and down and down and down, and then whoop! Fuck! It got me.